In this video, I answer all your questions about the tyre temperatures displayed and stone cold tyres. Does it actually impact your quali laps? Hello everyone and welcome to this tyre temperature video that many people have been asking about. That many people have said, Tidge, how do you get the tyre temps in Gran Turismo 7? How do you do it? Why do you have it? I can't find a setting. I've had so many comments around that. Let me just put this out there straight away. There is no setting in Gran Turismo 7. What you see on all the videos that I make is that it's edited in to my recordings. So I record it via OBS. There's basically an app I use, and I'll go through that app and I'll explain how you can get it as well, so you can have this information. But essentially, I put it on so then you can see that information. Now, I've actually been testing tyre temperatures for many weeks. I've been trying to understand how they work in Gran Turismo 7 because we really don't get that much information around it. Really don't get that much information, and we need it, if I'm honest. They're actually very impactful. The first thing we're going to do, and you will see that we'll transition from B-roll to actual footage where it relates to it, is I'm going to tell you about how to set this up, because you could set it up on a mobile phone or a tablet, or you can do what I do, which is use it on a PC and an emulator, and that's what we're going to go into now. So here we are with the emulator. Okay, so it's called Mimu. And I'll put a link in the description as to where you can download this if you want to use it on PC. Again, you can download Sim Dashboard, which is what I use for your mobile or tablet without an emulator. But I use an emulator on the PC because I want to put it into my recordings and so I can record the data itself. Now, I also have Coach Dave Academy in terms of the Delta app, and I'm obviously partnered with them as well, so you can check them out in the description. But they also record tyre temperatures. They just don't have an app for this, so in terms of something I can view live, which is why I use Sim Dashboard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double-click Sim Dashboard. And it loads into this. And this is all it is. This is all I use. So I obviously, on OBS, filter this out. But essentially what happens is this can pick up the data of Gran Turismo. It then puts it into this app, just the tyre temperatures. I've set my own colors on it, and that is it. And that's all that runs, okay? Now, this information on full screen, as you're seeing it right now, is massive. So it's very easy to look at, isn't it? You can see that quite clearly. When you race, obviously, you'd want to be looking at it on the Gran Turismo 7 screen, and I don't do that. A lot of people get confused and think I'm using it at the time. However, if I had a mobile or tablet right in front of me, I'd be able to see it as I race because I could just look down quickly and look back up. And that is actually beneficial in many ways. However, just to put it out there, I don't use that. It's just recorded or added onto recording just so I can get the information about tyre temperatures. But that's how you use it. I downloaded Sim Dashboard. There are other applications which can grab this information as well. The Coach Dave Academy Delta app also grabs this information. It just doesn't have this way of designing it, so I can add it to OBS, which is why I'm showing you this way. So this is Coach Dave Delta for those wondering, and I've just loaded a previous session here just to give you an idea. This is the exact same thing. It does capture more data. As I say, I do partner with them. I do love this app personally. I think it's great if you do want to improve. But you can see here it's captured information from the first session I did on Daily Race A this week. And it's like speed, it's like everything in here. And again, it's because all the data is in the network. And literally, when it's in the network, in terms of Gran Turismo, apps can grab it and then display it in whichever format. Now, obviously, they have to do a little bit of work in behind the scenes, but it's still all there. Now, the critical part of that is it all has to be on the same network. So, one issue that you may come across is if you have multiple networks in your house. What do I mean by this? Is whether you've got a mesh and your standard internet that comes in, so on your router, and they're basically two separate networks. I found that if my device connects to the mesh, which is basically like a separate network, consider it as such, and the PlayStation is on the different network, the data isn't captured because my mobile phone is on the mesh that I have. Consider it a different network, as I say, in the house. So if I try and connect with my mobile phone, it doesn't work. I have to connect my mobile phone to the actual network my PlayStation's on, and then it will capture it. So just keep an eye out for that if you are looking to set this up. Again, I've shown you Coach Dave Delta there and Sim Dashboard. They're the two that use Gran Turismo data in terms of what I use. And that is grabbing that information and then displaying it either in the recording as you're seeing it or storing it as a session like Coach Dave Delta. What you're interested in now is probably my discoveries, and this is where it gets a little bit interesting. So let's get into this then a little bit more. Now, when I live stream and I go into a practice lap, you'll often find me hitting start and retry or restart, or whatever you want to call it. Now, a lot of you ask me the question, Tidge, why do you do it? Why do you not just keep going round and round and round? Now, for me personally, I often find that my first lap is my quickest lap. Second lap generally isn't normally quicker. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And then third onwards is it's not normally quicker, and generally it's pretty useless for me to do. Doesn't always happen in that situation, but most of the time it feels like that. And I, as well, personally, from my perspective, I like a good start to the lap. So if I don't get the good start to the lap, there's no point me carrying on, and it wastes a minute of my time or 2 minutes, depending on the lap in question. So, is the tyre temperature impacting us in that situation? You've seen over the weeks and months that we've been doing the time trial guides where the tyre temperatures have been on, including in the weekly race guide as well, and all the other races that, you know, the tyre temps have been there. And I've been monitoring those tyre temperatures just to see what the impact is, to be honest with you. In races, how is tyre wear impacted? And in qualifying laps, does it impact me? We're also going to do some additional tests now as well. So, I restart. Mikhail Hizal, TRL Lightning, somebody I consider to be the best Gran Turismo driver of all time, the GOAT, of course, of Gran Turismo, did a 50-lap session recently to get the rank 1 time at the Nürburgring. And essentially, that showed you that you don't necessarily have to restart. And Mikhail gave some very good reasons in terms of not restarting, seeing the delta, staying in rhythm, and learning the car as well, which are all very good and very valid reasons. Some of you have said you prefer going for 3, 4, 5 laps, and that's very good as well, but is it impacting you in a negative way? Whereas I like to do it on the first lap, you'll often see ghosts and replays do it on the first lap as well, whereas others, like Mikhail Hizal, is doing it on lap 50, for example, or in a 50-lap session. What we're going to do a number of tests now to go through that in detail, how tyre temperatures impact in quali laps, so then you can understand that from that perspective, how tyre temperatures impact in terms of racing, and then tyre temperatures in the wet and dry as well as a whole, because there's some weird stuff going on there, I believe. But what we're going to do first of all is try out tyre temperatures in quali laps. This is practice laps when you go into the daily race and you're just trying to set a quali time, not in the race, and do they impact us? Now I'm actually going to use a time trial lap here. I'm actually going to use the latest one as well, because that seems to be pretty good in terms of tyre temperatures, and I did reference it in that guide. We're going to start though with the stone cold lap. This is literally the bottom end of the temperatures that you can go. We could keep going on for ages. I did this in the Honda time trial that recently happened as well. Let's jump to that first test and let's see if it's impactful. So we jump to the Vulcan now. We've been sat here for 20 minutes. You can see in that bottom left hand side, the tyre temps are 27 degrees. So literally as nearly as cold as you can get it. I think I had it in 19 on the Honda Challenge. Now we're on racing soft tyres, which are a little bit grippy all the same. However, we should still see a massive difference here in grip if tyre temperatures impact qualifying laps. And that's the critical part of this, okay? So we're going to head towards line. We're going to be racing the Ghost. We can get around the 26. That's what we're looking for here. So we're going to head in towards turn 1. We should see a later braking in terms of actually going too deep on the brakes. And that all looks fine to me. We're going to the right-hander here. No real difference there. The Ghost is obviously a very quick Ghost here. It's Laporte at the moment as we continue on through here. We're not seeing that much. The tyre temps are going up and down a little bit crazy there, as obviously the Aston Martin is really abusing the tyres here as we head towards this left-hander. But one thing we're seeing here is there's no real issue there. 21.7, well, it's a little bit slow. It's not actually massively slow. That's just me not nailing the first sector correctly. And it's really hard to do that in a given lap when you just sat the car there for 20 minutes. You're not really in a rhythm, so you do expect to be a tiny bit slower, and that's what we're seeing right here as we go into the right-hander. Now, I did do this a couple of times just to be sure. I spent an entire evening of just putting the car there for 20 minutes, doing a lap, and then trying again, sort of thing. It was pretty frustrating, actually, because I had to just sit there and do nothing. But even so, in towards the right we go. We're still not seeing any big difference here between myself and the Ghost. And I take this as well from the fact that in a race, generally you do have a bit of an impact as you leave the pits. We get towards the end of the sector then, at 43.4 is bang on where you should be, really, as we continue on out of there. A little bit of oversteer, that's just me hitting the throttle a bit too early. And we're going to head towards the line now. So what we're seeing here, and identify very quickly, is that quali laps definitely aren't impacted by tyre temperature at all. So, you know, going back to what Mikhail Hizal did there with the 5th lap stint, no issues there with tyre temps still, and 26.3 is absolutely fine. So we're definitely seeing no real issue there in terms of tyre temps having an impact if they're stone cold, which also means when they heat up, there shouldn't be any issue there either. And, you know, recently in the time trial guide, I showed you, I think it was a 10 lap session. I'll have it on in the background for you. I did 10 laps, and the times didn't really change there either, so it shows you that tire temps aren't that impactful or impactful at all, because we don't know if there's any secret hidden thing going on. They're not that impactful at all in terms of the quality lap. So keep that in mind when you're doing this. So if you do like to go for 5 laps, 10 laps, then you're not actually impacted, whereas someone like myself just likes to hit the restart button. Again, you're not impacted that way. So it's a really good test there. We've identified that there is no issues with tire temps. Now, some of you are going to be going, Titch, are you sure? Well, let's do it in a lobby instead, where we know tire temps are impactful. Here we are then in the lobby. I've done the exact same thing. Just driven around out the pits and sat here for 20 minutes to wait for the tyres to go down to that 28 degrees. It was just 20 minutes just to see what the tyre temps would go to. Now, it's not a like for like with the time trial because I don't know the exact settings they're using in terms of times of day, but I've tried to match it. What I've done here is actually put the first lap and a second lap next to each other because we want to see exactly how the laps interact then. So as we head towards the braking zone, what's going to happen? So I've just stopped it here. Both sides or both laps here are just starting the braking phase. You can see that. And what we're looking for now are the differences. You can see tire temps on the left, tire temps on the right for each of the laps. As we come into here, we've just slowed it down to 50%. Anything in particular that we can see as we go into here? The one thing I am seeing is on the left-hand side, there is no apex. Now, you could argue, Tidge, you've just missed it or hit the brakes too late. Potentially so, but here we're seeing big apex speed differences. I've really slowed the car down on the left, carried the momentum on the right hand side, and I carry on through here as we go into the left then. We'll continue round the left-hander, carrying more speed there. I can quite clearly see I'm carrying more speed. And by the time we get to the end of the curve there, we are miles ahead on the right. Absolutely miles. Now you might say, oh, Tidge, oh, that's just because you made a mistake in sector 1. Okay, you know, that could be the case. That can happen if I've been sat there for 20 minutes. Let's go towards the next corner then, and we're going to do the same situation here. We're going to go into the corner, looking for any differences. I did line them up then. As we go into here, look at the apex speed differences. Now, this time we are at the same curb. We're trying to carry that same speed, and critically there, we are carrying more speed on the right-hand side. That's because the tyres are warmed up. So the tyres in a lobby are definitely impacted by tyre temperatures. You need to keep that in mind. Just jump to the right-hand lap. We can see the time difference here. So we've got 128.2 on the first lap, 126.9, sorry, on this second lap. Quite clearly, once you warm the tyres up, the car is going to perform better in a lobby. We can see that right there, which is nice to see and shows you the evidence that tyre temps aren't impacted in a quali lap, but they are impacted in a lobby. And we also know they're impacted in a race because what we're going to do is jump to Road Atlanta. So here we are at Road Atlanta, about to start the race in pole position. So this is a perfect opportunity to test it without dirty air, and this is the primary part of this. So when you start the race here, you're on cold tyres. You can see that with 58 degrees on the front left-hand tyre. So as we go into this corner, what we're going to do, we're going to stop it. And we're around 114 miles an hour. And we've just gone over that 60 mark on the front left. It shows you the front left is actually being used there. And then we're going to accelerate through the corner. So we clip the curb. We carry on up the hill here at Road Atlanta, over towards the left-hand side. And you can see there, we're just taking a bit more cautiously as we go into that corner because I'm aware there are colder tyres. And we stop it here. We're at 85 miles an hour in terms of apex speed. What we're going to do now, though, is actually jump to the very next lap here, and we're going to do the exact same thing. So as we go into here, once again, we come into here, and we're 2 miles an hour higher. So this is 116. It was 114 previously. There you can see that on the right-hand side. So lap 1 on the right, lap 2 on the left, and you can see the difference in tyre temps as well, 60 to 70. We head up here then, and we're going to head over towards the left-hand side as we go into the corner. And as we go into here, we're at 85 miles an hour, which, if you remember, in the previous lap, is actually the same. And this is where I believe the tyre temps actually come into play, because below 60 is where the tyres are cold, and above 60 is where they start to come into play. That's what I believe, at least, anyway. So you don't further on in this race then. We're about to come in the pits, and then we're going to hopefully have colder tyres in terms of this test, hopefully anyway. Otherwise, we actually do want warmer tyres. We started the race at 58 degrees on the front left, and that's where our primary focus is going to be as we come into the pits. So we're going to put some soft tyres on, as you can see here. So obviously it's a change of compound as well, so we can't do like for like in this situation, but what we can do is test the grip and the apex speeds as we leave the pits. As you see now, we are just leaving the pit with a magical car disappearing in front of us. And we can see here 60 degrees as we come out the pit, so it's above that, well, 59, 58 that we had earlier. And again, as we come through here, what we will do is put them all together. There we go. And we've got 75, which is the lap afterwards, 61 on the left. So big difference there in terms of tyre temperatures. And as we come up to here and go into this left-hander, we're not really seeing that much of a difference. You see there, the end of the curb is matched there as we continue on towards this fast right-hander. And again, it's that 60-degree margin, I think, is where the tyres really start to come into play. A little bit of a wiggle on the right-hand side as we do start to get in the dirty air of the Toyota Supra in front on that right-hand side, which is going to impact us a tiny bit. I am aware of that, but it's very hard to do a race test when you actually have other cars in a race. But the idea here is to show you that. We're going to get all the way to the sectors. And again, you're seeing the tyre temps here. Lap 1 on the new tyres, the out lap on the left-hand side there, 65, 62, 68, 66. On the right, 74, 66, 75, 71. So you can see they have warmed up, but there's been no real difference there. We came out on 60. It's gone up to 74. No real difference. So jumping to a different race now. We're on at racing hard tyres in this situation. And again, it's going to be different in terms of the compounds as well, because on racing softs, you're going to have more grip anyway, because they are soft tyres, versus racing hard, which is like this in this situation. Now, we're going to leave the pits, as we do in this bay run, and we're going to head out. And what we will do, we'll put side-by-side laps again here. So this is on the left, the first lap, the out lap, and on the right is the lap afterwards. You can already see big tyre difference change there. 78 on the front left versus 61 on the front left on the racing hard tyres, as we head up here. And once again, there is going to be a tiny bit of dirty air in here, but it's dirty air in both situations because we're still in that dirty air in both scenarios as we head in towards this bus stop chicane. Now, I've actually lined them up on the apex here, and that's where the lineup is. And instantly, we're already seeing an apex speed difference here. So 78 versus 62. Obviously, all the other tyres have changed as well here. And we're just going to have a look at the car going through here. So we slow it down here a little bit then, and speeds start to match up here as we start to get straight. And as we go to this right-hander, this is where I really want to focus on the apex speed now. So you can see here now that, well, the speeds are dropping massively here, and it's 92 versus 98. 92 versus 98. You'll also notice the front left on the left-hand side has really peaked in terms of temperature. It's massively peaked, okay? And the reason for that is because the front left's the one that's being overloaded. On the right, it's 83 degrees. So yes, it's been overloaded, but it's already in that temperature range. So the tyre's starting to heat up very quickly on the left-hand side, which is critical. It does mean, hopefully, that we do have a better exit. What we will do is we will continue on right now. And as we go through here then, you can see the gap to the car in front, a little bit different, but nothing insane there in terms of the dirty air. It should be very similar. And as we get towards the exit then, the speeds do start to match up. And the tyres on the left-hand side particularly have literally warmed up. So this very next lap, they should be fine. So we're seeing that there is a cold tyre temp issue in terms of when you come out the pits or the start of a race, but it's not there for very long. The second you really start putting temps into those tyres, when you get just above 60, whether it's on racing hard, medium or soft, it appears to then start to work fine. So the dry tyres, for me at least, appear to have the same situation each and every time in terms of their running temperatures where they do start to have grip and they become less slippy. What we're going to do now is jump to another race, and we're going to talk about the wet weather, because in the wet weather, that's where it can get a little bit more interesting and where I'm a bit confused, if I'm honest with you. Here we are at Spa, 24-hour layout. You can see down at the bottom, the weather radar. We're in dark blue territory, which means it's going to absolutely lob it down. We've gone on to the intermediate tyres. You can see we come out the pits on 59 degrees on the front, 60 on the rear. So I would argue that, as we showed in the dry run-in, 60 degrees is what you come out on in racing tyres, whether it's wet or dry. Just advanced a lap later, so the rain's really coming down now. Green rain, which does mean very heavy rain. You can see we're in the wet weather situation. And it's at this moment I would expect the tyres to be really cooling, because we're oversaturating the tyres. They're not getting any heat into them at all because they can't disperse the water quick enough. That's what I would expect to happen in this scenario. A bit like if you're on dry tyres in the wet weather, you just have no grip there because you're literally not touching the tarmac. Anyway, we continue on here. You can see the wet weather is now changing towards dry again. The rain is really lifting off there. We've still got a very saturated track. Temperatures haven't really moved either since we've come out. The rears have gone up a little bit, of course, but that's just because we've been racing round. The front's really not working very well at all as we continue on here. We're going to go a lap later again. Here, lap number 10, and the track is really starting to dry up. Now, you can see that in the bottom left-hand side with that wet bar there. You can see the moisture on the circuit. We're very much nearly into the dry line here. Dry tyres on the dry line would be useful, but of course it's wet off circuit as we continue on towards the end of the lap. Now you see tyre wear starting to come into play, so that's definitely a case of the intermediates really getting some, well, they're gripping, they're being used, but it's not tyre temperature related, which is my real big point here, because if it's a drying track, which it is now, we're very much getting towards the end of the wet session here. It's going to be a very dry line. So the tyres should really start overheating. But they don't. They weirdly don't. And this doesn't happen in wet weather either. Wet weather to dry tyres. Same thing doesn't happen. The tyres seem to just have their own operating windows. So in this case, I would argue the operating window for the intermediate tyre is going to be between 55 and probably 65 or something around that nature in terms of the fronts. The rears don't seem to be doing that much, but again, this is a front engine rear wheel drive car in the Genesis Group 3 car, so I don't know. But I have to make assumptions based on this that tyres aren't simulated that much. They really aren't. You can see the drying line on the inside there as we go through here. Tyres, they're still not changing that much. We are gripping more, which you do expect to get more heat in them, but I expect them to be overheating at this moment in time, and they really aren't overheating. Apex's tyres are gone there. They're on wet weather tyres, for those wondering, in terms of the opposite team here, as we go into the left-hander. Those tyres aren't burning up. They're just being used more. That's all it is. They're just being used more. They're getting more grip, and that's the only way heat is going into them. So it definitely doesn't simulate tyre temperatures in the way I would expect it to, because I know when I race in other games, the tyres definitely do heat up in this situation. Like, the tyres would be screaming at this moment in time. They would be burning. They'd be so much hotter than a dry tyre. Now, I would argue the softs, the mediums, the hard tyre, whichever tyre you're on, in this situation, would be around the same temperature. Would be around the same temperature than these intermediates right now as we cross the line there. We did win this race, which is happy days. But literally, 75, 74 on the fronts is what I expect the dry tyres to be on the drying line. I'd expect these tyres to probably be plus 10 or even more. It's a bit of a weird situation there, just to put that into perspective, and what we've sort of discovered here, because I know some of you will be like, well, Tidge, what you're trying to explain here. In a nutshell, what I think we've discovered is that the tyres, so the wets, the intermediates, and then the dry tyres, all have their own operating windows. So for the intermediates there, I would have to guess it's around 55, 65. I don't know for definite because it's very hard to get an exact answer. And we'll talk about that in the conclusion of this video, of course. But around 55, 65 is where they work. And then after 65 is where they're going to really start to wear down. And I'd argue that's what they're trying to translate into an overlapping tyre. Dries, of course, they work from around just above 60, maybe 16, just above, as we've discovered with the previous test we've done. And then they work up to around 80 to 90. Now, I'm going to get into the 90 in a second, because when you do get to 90 degrees, well, guess what happens? The front tyres, the rear tyres, all the tyres start burning up a lot. We jump to basically a weekly race guide. This is from a while ago. That's why there's no audio in terms of engine noises here, because I didn't want my voice commentating over my voice. So on the right side, you can see the tyre temps there, down in the low 60s, where we start normally. That's where we come out the pits on those kind of temperatures. Daily races obviously kick off very quickly. We go to 80 degrees on the fronts. No real tyre wear there after the first lap. Looking pretty good, to be honest with you. It looks like you could do 20 laps on these tyres. Around 80 degrees in terms of running temps. So again, not too shabby at all, and you can see some racing going on here. But those tyres are going to continue to race. So we get to 88, 89, lap number 3 now. Again, there's not really that much wear there, if I'm honest with you, in terms of tyre wear. So it looks like these tyres could go on for a long time. However, and what we're going to do now is, as we need to get rear-ended there, is we're going to advance a bit further on. And what we're going to do is look at 91. Now, suddenly, look at these tyres. They're starting to wear very quickly. The heat in the tyres is really starting to put pressure on the tyres. And we really noticed this in a manufacturer series in the past. I think it was a manufacturer series anyway, where it was a case of you have to keep the tyres below 90. Otherwise, you're going to have issues. I think Womble Leader actually mentioned that, which is why I started to really look into this. And this race was perfect in terms of identifying that. 96, 97, those tyres are starting to wear significantly in this race. The fronts are absolutely being nuked. The rears, absolutely fine. This is a mid-engine rear-wheel drive car, by the way. So those rears should be being nuked, but they're not. The fronts are being nuked because there's so much downforce and grip in this car. The tyre wear is just going nuts. Look at this, 98 on the front left now. Those tyres are burning up like crazy, absolutely burning up. And that's what I wanted to show here, that there are definitely fundamentals in the tyres where if they hit a certain temperature, and we don't know what these are, they're not explained to us, but if you hit a certain temperature, guess what's going to happen? That tyre wear is going to start getting nuked very, very, very quickly. And you see it right there. 98 degrees. 98. And nowhere in the game does it tell you about this, right? This is all a learning experience. We're trying to identify it. And it's one of my issues, to be honest with you. It really is. In conclusion then for this video, and hopefully it's been of use to you as well. And this is my opinion. And your opinion may differ. And if it does, let me know in the comments. So first of all, why isn't this information even given? Because it definitely does have an impact. We've seen that at the start of races, just getting up to speed, you are going to lose a little bit in the first couple of corners, and then suddenly you're fine. towards the higher end of the temperatures, tyre wear becoming very impactful in terms of the tyre temps being above 90 for dry running in racing tyres. Why isn't that information told anywhere? Why isn't it even on the screen? So in previous Gran Turismos, we did have it showing hot tyres where they were being overused. And arguably, in GT7, the cold tyres, it does say when they're cold, just with a very, very, very faint blue margin around them. It's so faint, you could hardly tell, to be honest with you. You've got to proper zoom in or have extreme brightness on your monitor or TV or whatever you use. But to me, this information should be shown if it is critical to gameplay. It's like anything. Don't hide it. Show it. Then the player can use it if they want to use it. Make it an option. Turn it off. Turn it on. I know a few people have been asking me, how do I turn it on? And hopefully the start of this video did help you with that. For me, it hinders Gran Turismo. It really does, because the information isn't told anywhere. New players wouldn't have the foggiest idea why it's happening. Or they might go, oh yeah, my intermediates are burning up due to the dry line. They're not really burning up. They're just no use anymore, and the dry tyres would work better. They're the same temperature in that same running. So it doesn't make any sense at all, in my opinion. And nobody really has a 100% clue of what the actual perfect operating range still is. I don't. I've got rough estimates there. 90 degrees being the upper end of the racing dry tyres. Intermediate's probably going to be 65 degrees, roughly around there, and then they start burning up. Wet weather tyres, I know I haven't done that testing here, but the whole idea is to show you that this happens, and you can do these tests yourself now, knowing how to do it. But again, that'll be even lower. I imagine probably 55, and then it starts killing those tyres, because we did see the wet weather tyres falling off a bit earlier. But nowhere does it say what the actual operating ranges are. Now, in other games, they do that. So it hinders Gran Turismo, in my opinion, that this information isn't explained properly in the game at all, anywhere, in any shape or form. I haven't seen it. People are struggling with it. They really do need to show this information. And it doesn't even work like real life, in my opinion, those tyres. It really doesn't. Now, I'm not a tyre expert, so maybe I'm wrong in that situation. But I don't think they work the same as in real life. You often hear, I'm burning up my fronts. I'm burning up my fronts when the wets are going into dry. They weren't burning up there. They were the exact same temperature. They've simulated the wear. They definitely have simulated the wear. And I'm not disagreeing with that. But the temperatures do not match in that situation. What they've done is set parameters to make them work. And I think that's the numbers game in the background. You just set the numbers, and that's how the game is working. A bit like a database and options. You say, okay, well, if I'm going to change the physics, let's make the intermediates now 70 degrees before they start burning up. And they just change that number from 65 to 70. That's what I think actually happens, and why there is a difference between the tyres. It's the same for the grip levels. They'll just change the number in that situation. Because I don't like the wet weather running anyway, because I think the wet weather tyres just behave so weirdly and bizarrely in the game. It just feels like an ice skating simulator rather than a driving simulator when it does rain. Even though I still do want wet weather racing. For me personally, I don't feel tyre temperatures should exist in the game unless we're told about that information. So some of you may disagree with that and go, well, it's simulation. Yeah, but it doesn't simulate it properly, in my opinion. And if the player doesn't know, how can the player use that information even though they're being impacted by it? It seems a bit just frustrating for everybody involved there, because it's like, well, I've no idea what's going on, but something's going on. It's like at the start of a race. If you're a new player, you just get into your first daily race and you've been practicing, and then you jump into the race. Guess what? You got tyre temps now, so you got a bit of a grip change there anyway from the practice sessions. But then on top of that, your first lap is going to be very different to your second lap, because the first couple of corners, you may just understeer straight off and go off. And it's like, well, tell us that information. Why don't you just show the numbers and say, oh, wow, I've only got 50 degrees. And then you'd be like, okay, I've got cold tyre temps. Now I'll warm it up a bit. Or, I might weave a little bit at the start. And then go into turn one with a 1 degree higher temps. It might help me that bit more. Would be good to know. It would be good to know. And on top of that, nobody really knows when their tyres are dirty either. When you run off the circuit or four wheels, that's when your car has dirty tyres. Believe it or not, if you're two wheels off the circuit, your tyres aren't dirty and you can still carry on as if nothing's happened. There is no indicator for that. So I would really like to see that blue margin indicator to be very much more prominent, at least, to show blue or red when they're overheated, and maybe green when they're normal, and then maybe you go brown when they're dirty. There you go. I've just solved the problem in a nutshell. I'm thinking about it out loud now. Imagine if we had that, where it was blue for cold, green for perfectly running, red for hot, brown for dirty. Winner. That's what I think they should do, in my opinion. If they want to keep the tyre temps in, which I'm all for, but tell the information to the player. That'd be really good to know. And that way, we have it as a graphic on the screen. Don't even have to know numbers. The colour thing is enough, in my opinion. And that would be good to know going forward, because I think they actually just use those boundaries, so the colours would work. Even so, that has been it for this tyre temperature video. It's been a lot a lot of hours put into this one because I've had to go and look back for the footage, find the footage, edit it in, do my own testing as well. And I've been doing it for a number of weeks, as I say. So if you have enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a like. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, stay in touch with all the latest content. If you disagree in my opinion, great. Make sure you put it in the comments. If you've got different feedback or you've got different testing where you've found something different out, put it in the comments as well. It's good to get the information out there. I appreciate that. I'm not 100% right in all this. And as I say, I don't even know what the perfect operating range is. I've just got a rough idea of how it's working now. Thank you once again for watching, and I hope to see you in another video or live stream again very soon.